The message this morning comes from the Gospel according to Luke. From the 12th chapter, the 13th through the 21st verse. Once again, I'm still reading from the New King James Version of the Bible. Now, this is a real familiar story, folks, but it also has some very important lessons we still need to always remember. So beginning with the 13th verse of the 12th chapter of the Gospel according to Luke, hearken unto the reading of the word of the Lord. Then one from the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. But he said to him, Man, who made me a judge or an arbiter over you? And he said to them, Take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses. Then he spoke a parable to them, saying, The ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, What shall I do, since I have no room in my stores, my crops? So he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there I will store all my crops and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, Fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whom will those things be which you have provided? So is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. The word of the Lord for the people of the Lord. May he have blessing and understanding to the reading of his words. As I said, this is a familiar story. We've heard it time and time again, most of us. And yet, somehow, it seems to work sort of like water on a duck's back. The world around us tells us quite the opposite. The things that we learn, the ways that we live, are all structured on exactly the opposite from what this story tells. It's interesting the way it starts. When Christ is asked by somebody to tell his brother to divide the inheritance. You see, back in their times, the oldest male child got 75% of everything, and then the younger siblings divided the other. And this guy wasn't happy with that. He wanted Christ to tell his brothers, divide this with him, be more fair. Christ responds in an interesting way. He says, Who made me a judge or an arbiter over you? Christ tells us that he didn't come to judge. He came to save. And all too often, the world looks and we teach, or seem to teach all too often, that Christ came, and his coming and our salvation is all about judgment. And Christ judging us. Christ says, I didn't come to judge. I came to save. I came to heal. I came to bring you better life. I came to free you from slavery to sin and death. And yet, as we look at the parable, we see something that is exactly the opposite. Christ warns us about what he called covetousness, which is wanting stuff that belongs to somebody else, or in essence, wanting something that's not ours. But it's more than that that he's warning. He's warning about wanting stuff of this world. Somehow we forget that everything that we have, everything that is belongs to God. We want to all throughout proclaim stuff. This is mine. I worked hard for this. It's mine. No, it's not. It's still God's. Because He gave it to you, or used, or made you a steward over it, doesn't make it yours. Our whole world, the society, is built around the concept of ownership. Of having more stuff. We spend most of our lives struggling and planning for our retirement, making sure we'll have a good life. And I guess I learned a lesson fairly early from my father. Father decided to, though he had a printing company and we were working at it, he decided to officially retire at 62. He had paid in the maximum amount of Social Security for 40-something years. My father drew one Social Security check before he died. All the planning, all the work, all the putting back stuff, all the planning for retirement was wasted. Fortunately enough, my father also spent a great deal of time doing the things to plan about things in heaven too. My father taught me early about faith, and no matter how things got, no matter what was happening, he would always say, "Don't worry, God will provide." God will provide. And yet, we, like this man in here, seem to want to struggle and build bigger barns and have more room to store stuff up where we can do what? Eat, drink, and be merry. Have a great time. The sad part is that while we're doing that, most of us forget that our greatest times should be the times in which we're doing God's work. We struggle, as it were, to make sure that we do the things that this world tells us we should. Folks, this world has nothing to do with God. And if you listen to it, most of this world, if they could, would tell us that God's dead, or He doesn't exist, or He isn't anything like what we want. Or even worse, that we have God within us and that's all we need. I hope we do have God within us, but in the form of the Holy Spirit. We're not gods. We're no part gods. What we need to remember is our work that we do is by what we lay up in heaven. How we do for others. I'm